All right. We are going to go through the process of how a bill becomes a law. Now, this is a relatively complicated process, and we probably won't be able to truly understand it just on these notes today, but we'll get a beginning, and then we'll do an example in class tomorrow. On your note guide, you have this, okay, and we'll add this to it as we go. So let's start with a few things. First of all, when it comes to the bill to law process, we should know that it does make a difference on membership of Congress, at least if we want to understand how things work. So in the House today, the Republicans dominate the House. They have 247 members to the Democrats' 188. So they have a majority in the House. They also have a majority in the Senate. They have 54 Republicans to the 44 Democrats. There are 2 independents, and they both side with the Democratic Party. Now, this makes a difference when it comes to leadership. We already mentioned that the Speaker of the House is always going to come from the majority party. Well, that means the Speaker, who is the most powerful person in the House, is a Republican. The Senate Majority Leader is going to come from the majority party, okay, and that's probably the most important person or powerful person in the Senate. That is also going to be a Republican. When we look at membership in committees, you'll notice that committee makeup gives an advantage to, at least a numerical advantage to, membership. Okay, so the Republicans will have a numerical advantage in committees when we get to those later, and they will also get to have the committee chair people will come from the Republican Party. Okay, and those are all important things. So this makeup of both the House and the Senate, the fact that the Republicans control both of them right now, is a significant advantage that the Republicans have. All right. A bill can start in either the House or the Senate. It really doesn't make any difference unless it's a tax bill. The Constitution says a tax bill must start in the House of Representatives, but only members of Congress can introduce a bill in the Congress. Okay, so it can start in either, but only members of Congress can introduce them. Now, if we're going on here, and I don't know if I'm going to fill this out the whole way, but if, for this part of it, only members of Congress goes here. And over here, either the House or the Senate. It doesn't really make any difference, unless, of course, again, it's a revenue bill. Now, if you notice this is what you have in your note guide. If you notice, after a bill is introduced, it goes to the House committees. Now, we think of the full House as everybody in the House of Representatives, but that's not where the work of bills actually get done. The work of bills gets done at the committee level. Okay, so what happens is, after a bill is introduced into the House of Representatives or Senate, let's just say House to begin with today, it is then sent to a committee, which is a specialized group of members of the House of Representatives. Committees are made up of members of, in this case, we'll say the House. So every member of Congress, every member of the House is going to be in 2 or 3 committees. Every member of the Senate is going to be in 2 or 3 committees. And when a bill deals with a particular issue, let's say it's an agricultural bill, then it will be sent to a committee, the Agriculture Committee, that deals with agriculture. Okay, and those members of that committee will do most of the work on the bill. The committee chairperson always comes from the majority party, and the chairperson is the most powerful person in each committee. And the committee always has more members from the majority party than they do from the minority party. So as we said here, the chairperson then is going to be a Republican today, and there'll be more Republicans on the committee than there are Democrats. And because the committee is where most of the work of the bill gets done, that's significant, because the committee can do a lot of things, but everything takes a majority vote to do it. Okay, now let me show you some examples of House committees and then Senate committees. These are the list of committees in the House of Representatives. Okay, and I'll enlarge this to make it easier to see for you. But we have like the Agriculture Committee and the Appropriations Committee and Armed Services and Budget and so on. These are all House committees. And let's just click on the Agricultural Committee site. And then we can look at their members, probably right here, membership. And we'll see in the House Agricultural Committee that these over here are the majority. These 2 columns here are the majority party. These are the Republicans. These are Democrats. This is the committee chairperson. He is a Republican. And if you go down, if we scroll down, we'll see that there are more Republicans than there are Democrats in that in that committee. There's one, two, what do we got for Democrats? Well, trust me, there are more Republicans than Democrats in that committee. If we go to the Senate, Senate has different committees, but basically the same. They may have different names, but they're basically dealing with the same issues. So in the Senate committee, we could look at the Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry Committee. And if we go to membership page, we see that the majority party is over here, and this is the chairperson, okay, who is a Republican, okay. And then we can scroll down, and these two columns are Republicans, and these two are Democrats. Notice there are more Republicans than there are Democrats on this committee. Okay, John Thune from South Dakota is on the Agricultural Committee. That's important for us because we deal with a lot of bills, a lot of agriculture in our state. So we would like our member of the House or Senate, or members of the Senate or our member of the House, to be on agricultural committees, because any bill that deals with agriculture is going to be dealt with in those particular committees. Okay, so a bill then starts at a committee level. It's assigned to a committee. Well, there's a few things that a committee does. One thing it will do is it'll hold hearings. There'll be outside experts that will be called in, and they will hold hearings and question those experts to try to get more information about that piece of legislation. How will it affect the industry or whatever it is? So hearings are held basically to better inform members of Congress. These outside experts are testifying at the hearings. I'll show you a hearing tomorrow in class. The other thing they can do is they can make whatever changes they want to a committee or to that particular bill. They can add things, they can delete things. When we say that the work of the bill is done at the committee level, it's really true. A bill may change a great deal from its original wording to or may change along the way, and most of those changes are done at the committee level. It takes a simple majority vote to make that happen. Okay, and then the committee votes on the bill. If the bill does not get a majority vote, it doesn't make it out of committee. It dies into committee level, and if it dies, it's done. If the bill gets a majority vote, then it moves to the next stage. Now, we aren't to that next stage yet, but we're getting there. So what can happen here? Well, at the committee level, one of the things that occurs is they hold hearings. We probably should put outside experts on there to better get to be more informed about that piece of legislation. Okay, they can change the bill. They can make any changes, additions, or deletions out of that particular bill. Okay, and then they vote on the bill. And if the bill does not get a majority of votes needed, it dies. That's majority. It's a little hard to see, but a majority vote is needed. Now, if that bill receives a majority of votes, then it moves to the next stage. And that next stage is the floor vote. Okay, so now it goes to the full floor of the House of Representatives. This is where all 435 members of the House are. And at the floor, they can do a few things. One thing they can do is debate the bill. Okay, and this is debate the merits of the bill. Really, it's speeches as much as anything else, but people will talk in favor of a bill or opposed to a bill. Again, I'll give you more examples of that in class tomorrow. They can make any changes they want to the bill at the floor level. Now, most of the changes are done at committee level. However, they can change the bill here too, and all it takes is a majority vote. So if someone wants to add an amendment to the bill, they can do so. And if you can get a majority of members of Congress or the members of the House to approve it, then that's added to the bill. Then they vote on the bill. Okay? And again, it takes a majority vote for that bill to pass. Otherwise, that bill dies. Okay, so it's very similar to the committee level, except for they don't have outside experts at the floor. They just have the debate that occurs. So on here, what happens to the bill? Well, the bill can be debated at the floor level. The bill can be changed, at the floor level. And I really should have a third thing here. You probably want to add that. And the third thing is it can be voted on. And again, it takes a majority vote for that bill to become a law. Okay, or actually it hasn't become a law yet, I'm sorry. It takes a majority vote for that bill to pass. If that passes the floor, it has not become a law yet. There's a number of steps that still have to occur. But if it passes the full floor of the House of Representatives, it moves on to the next step. And that next step is to the second house. Now, a bill does not have to start in the House of Representatives. Our example bill that I'm using today did. But if it goes to the other house, if it goes to the Senate, it's the same process. Everything is the same except for, well, they have a filibuster, which we'll talk about in a second. So there's not a whole lot of differences. So when we look at this here, what happens? Well, we can just add this over here. We can, these exact same things go over here. They can change the bill. They hold hearings, they change the bill, they can vote on the bill, and again, it's a majority vote that's needed. Whatever you wrote here, right over here, it's the same. Same thing when it comes to the floor, for the most part. Well, we're going to talk about how it's different, but a bill, the same process occurs. So we can just add those things over here, and again, it takes a majority vote. But there are some differences. The major difference when it comes to the Senate is the filibuster. The House does not allow a filibuster, but the Senate does. Okay, and a Senate filibuster is, well, let me explain it. Let's use this to explain it. I'll come back to that. What a filibuster is preventing a vote on a particular piece of legislation. Okay? Or it could be a nomination. Remember, the Senate has to approve nominations. So let's say that we have a bill, and there are 55 senators that approve this bill and 45 that are opposed to it. Well, that's a simple majority, and that's all that the Constitution says is needed for a bill to become a law. But the Senate has a rule that says that no bill can be voted on until everyone has said everything they want to say on that particular bill. Okay, so what a filibuster was traditionally is essentially trying to delay a vote on the bill by talking on it. So you would literally talk for hours on a particular bill, and what you're hoping is that the other side finally gives up and says, the heck with it, let's move on to something else. So basically you're denying a vote from being taken on a bill. Okay, now if you have one or two people, you aren't going to be able to filibuster a bill successfully. Okay, so let's say you talk for 15 hours and the other person talks for 15 hours. All right, so you delayed the bill for 30 hours, but they'll still vote on it. But if you have enough people, theoretically, you could talk for a very long period of time and delay a vote on the bill, maybe long enough that the side who has a majority says, the heck with it, we'll just table this. Now, it's only allowed in the Senate, but we should know that the filibuster rules have changed. Today, a filibuster just needs to be declared. You don't need to actually talk on a bill. So if a piece of legislation is out there, and we have 55 senators that approve it, but we have 45 that are opposed, those 45 can declare a filibuster. Now, if they declare a filibuster, that means that that bill cannot be voted on unless those majority can break the filibuster. So to break the filibuster, it's called a cloture vote, and it takes 60 senators to break it. If they have 60 senators, they can break the filibuster with a cloture vote and then vote on the bill. But in our scenario, where 55 are in favor of it and 45 are against, those 45 can filibuster a bill, and the 55 don't have enough to end the filibuster, which means that bill will never be voted on. And if it's not voted on, it can't move on to the next step. So essentially, it's killing that bill through just inaction. All right, this is a strange rule. It is only used in the Senate, and it is a reality. So even though the Constitution says a majority vote is needed to pass a bill, in the Senate you really need a filibuster-proof Senate, which means you need to have at least 60 people that are supporting a piece of legislation, or it won't pass the Senate. So in reality, a bill will easily pass the House. A Republican bill will easily pass the House. But a Republican bill today will not easily pass the Senate because the Democrats will most likely filibuster that bill. In 2013, some rule changes were made on the filibuster. Okay, and those rules are that you can filibuster a Supreme Court nomination, but you can't filibuster other presidential nominations. Okay, those are the only real changes on the filibuster bill. So you can still declare a filibuster on other things. Now, if it's a lower court nomination and you want to do the old-fashioned filibuster, talking it to death, you can still do that. And you can filibuster a bill using the old-fashioned way if you want to. Ted Cruz did in September of 2013. He spoke for 21 hours to delay a budget bill. What did he speak about? Well, Ted Cruz spoke about, he read from Dr. Seuss. He doesn't even have to talk about the bill. He can just, as long as he's talking. He praised White Castle hamburgers. He did a Darth Vader imitation. He quoted from Duck Dynasty. But mostly he talked about repealing Obamacare. Okay, these were all things that he talked about on his filibuster that went on for 21 hours. Now, he was a one-man filibuster. So after his 21 hours were up, they voted for it. The strange thing is the bill that Ted Cruz was voting for, or was filibustering against, passed 100-0. Ted Cruz filibustered a bill, and then the very next day voted in favor of that exact same bill that he was filibustering for 21 hours. I think Ted Cruz filibustered that bill to make Ted Cruz more well-known, more than anything else. I want to show you another quick video it's like a 2-minute video on the filibuster. It maybe does a better job of explaining it than what I did. It's kind of complicated. It's kind of important. It's going to work here, trust me.
Use of the procedure known as the filibuster in the U.S. Senate is both common and controversial. It's pretty complicated, too. Here's what you need to know. First, don't bother to search for the word filibuster in the Constitution. It's not there. Instead, look to Senate rules. Rules the senators make up for themselves, that is, which allow its members to hold up and block debate on any measure, for whatever reason. Senators can prevent the rest of the body from taking action until 60 of the members, known as a supermajority, agree to vote for cloture, which is aka a vote to end debate and stop the filibuster. That 60 vote requirement means a coalition of only 41 senators can block action with simply the threat of a filibuster. That threat and the coalition behind it makes it impossible for a simple majority, that's more than 51 senators, but less than 60, to take unilateral action. Lately, Republicans in particular have been filibustering a lot, blocking votes to confirm 3 consecutive judicial nominees from President Obama, and leaving POTUS none too pleased. While the vast majority of Obama nominees have been confirmed, nearly half of all cloture motions ever filed have been made since Obama became president.
We've seen an unprecedented pattern of obstruction in Congress that's prevented too much of the American people's business from getting done.
Out of frustration.
I want to pause this for a second. This film was made when the Democrats controlled the Senate. In the last congressional election, the Republicans took over control of the Senate. That's why the Republicans were filibustering. Today, if we're looking at it right now when the Republicans control the Senate, it would be the Democrats who are filibustering.
Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid opted to enact the so-called nuclear option in mid-November, changing Senate rules to allow executive and non-Supreme Court judicial branch nominations to be approved by a simple majority. That action effectively removes the threat of filibuster for most nominations. The change infuriates many Republicans and a few Democrats, too, who remember their days as a minority party thwarting President George W. Bush by using the filibuster on his nominees. The filibuster has long been revered as a tool that allows a single conscientious member of the minority to stand up for what they believe is right by staging a flashy talk-till-you-drop display of passion, a la Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. I will lock you! That kind of filibuster doesn't require a coalition of 41 to block action, rather just the ability of one senator to stand up, hold the floor, and just keep talking. And that kind of filibuster is still okay under the Senate rules. Rand Paul made use of it in the spring, delaying a vote to confirm John Brennan as CIA chief for almost 13 hours.
I will speak until I can no longer speak.
But the record holder in this category is Strom Thurmond, who delayed the Civil Rights Act of 1957 for more than 24 hours by reading everything from the Declaration of Independence to his grandmother's biscuit recipe. And that makes sense in a body designed by the founders to protect the rights of the minority. After all, when filibustering, as long as you keep talking, no one's voting. For time, I'm Zach Jones.
Okay. So that's the filibuster, a reality in the Senate. We really need to understand that to understand that it's still difficult for the Republicans to get bills to pass through the Senate, even though they have the majority. You really need a filibuster-proof majority. You need 60 members of your party in the Senate. It's not what the Constitution says, but that is our reality. Okay, so let's say that a bill does make it through both the House and the Senate. Okay, that bill most likely has been changed. Remember, a bill can change at the committee level, it can be changed at the floor level, it can change in the other house's committee, in the other house's floor. So there's a very good chance that the bill that passed the House is not the identical bill that passed the Senate, or you know what I mean? That the Senate may have added or deleted things. So the next step is not the President of the United States. After a bill has passed the House and then passed the Senate, it goes to what is referred to as the Conference Committee. And the Conference Committee is members of both houses that try to come up with a version of a bill that they think both the House and the Senate can agree with. Sometimes it's referred to as the Compromise Committee. It's needed because the House and the Senate must pass identical versions of a bill. And because a bill has changed along the way, they probably have not passed identical versions. So they'll come up with some compromise, some things that they may think that both the House and the Senate can agree to. Then, rather than go to the President, the bill has to go back to the House and the Senate again. This time, both houses must pass the exact same bill, so they can debate the bill. And they can vote on the bill, and again, it takes a majority of votes for that bill to pass. But they cannot make changes on the bill. Okay? So this bill that started, our example bill, that started in the House, went to the House committee, then the House floor, then the Senate committee, then the Senate floor, okay, and we'll assume that changes were made here. Then it has to go to the Conference Committee, and from the Conference Committee, it has to go back to the House and the Senate. Why does it have to go back? Well, we can add in here, both houses have to pass the exact same bill. Okay, and the bill may have changed previously. Okay, so now it has to go back into here. Now you can probably should put, what can they do at this point? Well, they can debate the bill, and they can vote on the bill. And again, takes a majority vote. But they cannot change the bill. All right, so if that bill passes, if it passes now the House and the Senate again, the next step is to go to the President of the United States. The President has some options. Number one, the President can sign the bill. And if the President signs the bill, that bill becomes law. A second option the President has is to veto the bill. Now, the veto of the bill is the President is rejecting the bill. If the President rejects that bill, the bill does not necessarily die because a veto can be overridden. To override a veto, after a President vetoes a bill, it can go back to both houses where they can re-vote on the bill. And if they can pass that bill with a two-thirds vote of the House, and then again a two-thirds vote of the Senate, that bill becomes law even though the President vetoed the bill. That's known as overriding a veto. Doesn't happen much, but it is an option that Congress has. Or the President's third option is to do nothing at all. A bill reaches his desk, he doesn't sign it, he doesn't veto it. Now, if he doesn't sign it or doesn't veto it, what would happen to the bill? Well, if the Constitution didn't specify, I don't know, but the Constitution does specify. If the president takes no action, the bill becomes law after 10 days. Okay? Unless, of course, Congress has adjourned. If Congress is not in session before those 10 days are up, and the president takes no action, that's known as a pocket veto, and that means that the bill dies. So the options the president has is to sign the bill or veto the bill or do nothing, and depending on if Congress is in session or not, the bill either becomes law or dies. Here's a list of presidential vetoes from the history of the United States till now. If we see here that there have been a total of 1,498 total vetoes in the United States history, okay? Regular vetoes, those are regular vetoes. Another 1,067 pocket vetoes, and only 110 were overridden. That's about 4% of vetoes that have been overridden. So a presidential veto, even though they can be overridden, are rarely overridden. And if we look at some of the presidents here, if we look at like Thomas Jefferson, 0 vetoes. James Madison, 5 vetoes, 0 overridden. Okay, the president who has vetoed the most bills in the history of the United States is Franklin Roosevelt. He was president the longest. He vetoed 372 bills. These, I think, were, which ones are these? The first line is a pocket vetoes. These were regular vetoes, and only 9 of those vetoes were overridden. President Barack Obama has had 4 vetoes total, 0 overridden. George Bush, 11 vetoes, or 12 total vetoes, 4 of them overridden. That's actually a fairly high percentage of his bills being overridden. Vetoes are not often overridden, which is important because what that means is the president's veto power is a major power in the legislative process. If a bill passes the House or Senate but it doesn't have a 2/3 majority and the president vetoes it, that bill's not going to become law. Okay? And it's hard to override a presidential veto. So if we go back to this, the president's options are to sign the bill. And if the president signs the bill, then that bill becomes law. Another option the president has is to veto the bill. If the president vetoes the bill, okay, that bill then has to pass both the House and the Senate. This is known as overriding a veto. Overriding, whoops, spelled that wrong, a veto. Okay, and it has to pass both houses with a 2/3 vote. And if it does that, then it becomes a law even though the president vetoed that bill. Or the third option is to do nothing. And that depends on what happened. If the president does nothing, the bill becomes law after 10 days. Unless Congress is not in session, in which the bill dies. That's called pocket veto. Okay? Now, if it gets through all of these steps, and there's a lot of steps, if it makes it through the committee, and then the floor, and then the committee, and then the floor, and then the conference committee, and then the floor of both houses, and is signed by the president, then that bill has become law. Now, there's some other things in here that we've mentioned before. The filibuster. We talked about that. You should have the filibuster stuff down. That's in another spot of your notes. And I will pull that filibuster stuff back up so you can go back to filibuster in the Senate. So there's probably not enough room to write it there. Earmarks and pork, We've talked about those things when we studied congressional spending. They can be added at any part along the way. So we know what earmarks and pork are. They're already in our note guides, but I want to put in here, it can be added during, let's just go during the legislative process. Okay, they can't be added at the conference committee. They can't be added here, and the president cannot add them. But any time up here, they can be added. Most bills, the ideas for bills come from, well, the people. You know, sometimes special interest groups. Businesses, or let's just go industry. You know, anywhere. But only members of Congress can introduce them. So if you have an idea for a bill and you want to get that bill introduced, you can write that bill yourself. And interest groups do a lot of that. They can write a bill, but they can't introduce it. Only members of Congress can introduce that bill. So you got to get somebody who's in Congress to take up that bill for you. And if you can do that, then your bill has a chance of making it, though not a real good chance, because bills don't make it very often. If you jump back to your note guide to find filibuster under the Senate, I'll go back to here so you have a chance to write down the filibuster rule. And I can explain this greater in class tomorrow if we need to. But again, it's preventing a vote on a bill. It's only used in the Senate. And the other important thing is a cloture vote. It takes 60 senators to end a filibuster, or to vote to end a filibuster and then vote on a bill. But if you don't have those 60 senators, you cannot end you can't end the filibuster, and that bill then essentially dies through inactivity. All right, now, a lot of process. The bill law process takes a long time. And the other thing I want to point out here is that there's a lot of, if you're a member of Congress and you're voting on a piece of legislation, you have a lot of people that are kind of want you to vote a certain way. Maybe the people from your states, the people who elected you, your constituents may be for or against a piece of legislation. Your political party may be putting pressure on you to vote a certain way. That parties like to vote together in a block. Other lawmakers, friends of yours, or people who share similar interests, we call those caucuses within Congress, may be putting pressure. The interest groups, you know, the NRA or the AARP or other interest groups that have either helped you in your campaign or are important in your district. Let's say it's a gun bill and you want to vote in favor of greater gun restrictions. Well, the NRA may be opposed to that. They may not give you money in the next election, but they may also actively campaign against you. And powerful interest groups can make it hard for members of Congress to run. Okay? The voters, those are the people from your state. The issue themselves may make a difference. Maybe you feel strongly about an issue, even though it goes against what the voters of your state want. So those things are all pulling on how should I vote on this particular bill. This idea that members of Congress can just vote on however they want is not really accurate. There is a lot of different groups that are putting pressure on them to vote one way or the other. All right. That is pretty much the process of how a bill becomes a law. Now, I say pretty much because it is the process, but we probably need to study a little bit more to better understand it, which we will. But for today, that's enough.